Ladies and gentlemen, the only correction I'd make, first of all, it's Tzvika Klein and the entire Jerusalem Post staff, thank you for inviting us, having us take part on behalf of Mossab and myself. The only correction I would make is it's not an interview, this is a discussion. And it's a discussion that involves every single person in this room. We tried to get a table at the Wolf and Lamb down the street for 500 people, but they said they had just given it away. So we have to do it here. But there's, at this particular moment, in the few minutes that we have to talk about a problem and a solution, as Mossab said very wisely downstairs, we really have to think out of the box. Because the post-October 7th reality puts us in a completely new world, breaking misconceptions, building new realities. And at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, which is today renamed the Jerusalem Center for Foreign Affairs, for the first time in our over 50-year history, we see ourselves as the engine for Israel's foreign affairs, serving as a bridge between the West and the Arab Muslim majority East. And in that context, after our October 7th, we were surprised by what is known in the literature of terrorism and war as a strategic surprise. 9/11, Pearl Harbor, October the 7th. And what shocked us at the Jerusalem Center for Foreign Affairs was the glee, the energy, the enthusiasm for Hamas in the free world. Because on the face of it, had there been an opportunity to understand what Israel had faced in terms of ongoing terror, 5 terror wars that had been prosecuted by the Hamas, 5, beginning in 2008, 2009, and decades of terror by the PLO before that, an empirical understanding that the Oslo experiment had arguably brought us to the moment that exploded on October the 7th. And what we did at the Jerusalem Center was to have a poll to understand another surprise. And that surprise is, why is it that there is such a tremendous expectation in the US-led Western Alliance for a Palestinian state on the heels of the worst massacre and mass murder in modern political history on a single day of any democratic country? And that taught us that we have to free ourselves from misconceptions, meaning that the free world, in large part, including from the highest levels of the American government to opinion shapers, media, Jewish community, by the way, and others, believe that this is an extension of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Our understanding and Israel's understanding as a national consensus issue is completely different. And as I turn to Mossab, I want to say the following, that in many cases in the Western discourse, Israel has been recast as the Hamas, and Hamas, from point of view of virtue, legitimacy, justice, has been recast as Israel. This inversion of legitimacy has been taking place over the last 31 years. And it is time that we stop defending ourselves intellectually, morally, and we must go from defense to offense, from intellectual defense to assertive diplomacy. And when I thought about who would be the best thinker, because Mossab Hassan Yousef is not only a fighter on Dr. Phil, he's a thinker, a deep thinker, who has profound ideas together with other JCFA scholars, our Vice President Abiram Belaish, Hussein Abu Bakr Mansour, Dalia Zaida here in the front row. Because what we understand is that Israel is an indigenous member of the Arab Muslim Middle East, and that is our new positioning, ladies and gentlemen. We are not part of an Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That does not define us anymore. So I want to turn, thank you. I want to turn to my friend and a teacher, Mossab, to help us understand, as the Middle East comes to the West to talk about the Middle East, instead of the West telling the Middle East what the Middle East should be doing. help us understand from an ideological, religious, and strategic point of view of the dangers of another Palestinian state post-October the 7th, in a sense that the West is missing something.
First of all, good evening to everyone. It's good to be here. Well, I guess we are awake. I was worried for a moment. Such a big question, and it's not an easy answer. Oh, I know that the Jewish slaughter on the hands of Muslims has been going for approximately 14 centuries. And for some reason, the Jewish people are in denial. I understand why. Because if the Jewish people admit that, then they will have to confront a majority of Muslims. And this is why we are at defense right now. From the early beginning of the war and prior to the war, I came to realize that the ideological dimension of this war cannot be ignored. And I got canceled many, many years ago, some 15 years ago, when I started criticizing and questioning the scripture in Islam that encourages Muslims to harm and kill Jewish people. And I think the Jewish people are a very peaceful nation that does not look to harm the Muslims. But at least I think that we have the right, you have the right to question and say, what's going on here? Why the scripture is inciting against the Jewish people, and what the world is doing about it. What other major religions is doing about it. And this is why I changed my strategy, that this is not only about Palestine. Palestine is non-existential. It's just a device that the Muslims use as a weapon against Israel and as a weapon against the Jewish people. Fundamentally, Muslims think that Allah hates the Jewish people. And how can they love the Jewish people if their God that they bow 20 times a day hates the Jewish people? So I am not here to speak against the Muslims, but I want you to be aware of this fundamental problem, at least in your subconscious. You need to have this somewhere, that we have an existential threat. And now you see it in reality, how they were able to just turn the narrative against Israel in no time. And this is why from the beginning of the war, I said, Muslims, you have to back off. This is not acceptable to take the side of a terrorist group that just committed a genocide, a capital crime, unforgivable crime, by the name of resistance and by the name of occupation, colonialism, etc. Not acceptable. And now we have hundreds of millions of Muslims and Arabs spreading propaganda. And as you see, when people see it thousands of times per day, they start believing in it. It becomes real. So it is the time to move from defense to offense, to call things for what they are, to see them for what they are, and there is no need to be afraid. There is no need for us to be depressed. I have been fighting against Islam alone, by myself, for so many years. And I don't need the permission from nobody. If they want me to cease to exist, this means that I have to fight for my life. And you are in the same position right now. I'm not calling for a religious war. There has been a religious war. And it's about time to wake up. I'm not saying that we go on a war with the Muslim people, but at least we need to educate the rest of the world that we are in danger. Some people out there, hundreds of millions of them, want us dead. And we have to defend ourselves. Hamas is not only acting on their own. They belong to the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood belongs to a religion. And that religion has a scripture. And it's about time to open the books for the rest of the world. The majority of the world are with the Jewish people. Hinduism, they understand the Islamic danger. Buddhism, Buddhists, Christians, and it's about time. We need some help from the big majority religions to stand with us, because this is existential fight. And if we don't win, it is going to be a disaster. The whole globe is going to go into chaos. I did not mean to talk about Islam this much. But in my opinion, Palestine, the Palestinian Authority, the PLO, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the Muslim Brotherhood, all of them are inspired by the same death cult. Yasser Arafat was a Muslim Brotherhood. Abdullah Azzam was a Muslim Brotherhood. Osama bin Laden was a Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas, Muslim Brotherhood. All of them are Muslim Brotherhood. So we have a big problem that we need to wake up. And if we don't keep ignoring and denying the existential threat, then we will have to face it eventually when it's too late. Palestine depends on the destruction of Israel. If there is any definition of Palestine, it means the absence of Israel. This is what Palestine is. And now, they got legitimacy somehow. But we ask them the question, what is Palestine? Is it an ethnic group? Is it a religion? Is it a distinct language? Do you have scripture? Are you a nation? Were you a country? None of that. So what is Palestine? And what is the purpose of Palestine? So for those who are representing the two-state solution, and I try to conclude, they want Israel to cease to exist, or they are not aware of this existential threat. Because in my opinion, Hamas is a small threat comparing to the Palestinian Authority. All this global chaos is managed by the Palestinian Authority, by the PLO. It's not Hamas propaganda. It's the one who sits in Ramallah, pay all the advocates worldwide through their embassies. Those are the ones who are fighting against Israel's legitimacy. So we need also to be aware of this big problem.
This is a really... First of all, Mossab just answered the following 6 questions that I had. So
my apology. I get carried away.
Yeah. Get him a bottle of Evian here. You know, this is a real bombshell, because the numbers that I've been fiddling with, what we did at the JCFA, is a poll in the last few days that showed that in Israel, 69% on October 6th opposed a Palestinian state. On October 8th, 79% of Israelis oppose a Palestinian state, which they understand will be a third Palestinian state that would be, as Hamas's commanders have said, after October 7th, we will do October 7th again and again and again. I quote the top leadership of the Hamas. And everyone in this room may know that the polling numbers in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, on behalf of Hamas are overwhelming in their support. So it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Hamas today is the recognized leader of the Palestinian street. Would that be correct?
They won the last election.
In 2005, in 2006.
And that was the last election. Actually, they are the legitimate leadership of the Palestinians.
So Houston and New York, we've got a major problem because well over 60% of the Jewish community and even more of the general community, in addition to policy elites, government, media, in this country, are expecting tomorrow morning a Palestinian state. And we're talking about the day after. What is the day after in Israel? The day after is right now. Because there not be a day after unless, in the view of the vast majority of Israelis, if Hamas is not defeated completely as a military and political power. That message, that idea, seems to be lost in the American discourse. How do you understand that, Mossab?
This is not the only thing lost in this misunderstanding of the problem. There is no way for Israel. I just came back from Israel, and I know the Israeli street vibe. I met with thousands of people on the street. I talked to so many people, and nobody can afford a Palestinian state that is hostile to Israel. What happened on October 7 cannot be ignored. And I have been warning against this issue. You cannot give them Judea and Samaria. You cannot give them the mountains. You cannot sacrifice the Jordanian Valley. This is a defense line. And I speak from security point of view. You see, I speak now like a right-wing Jewish extremist. But this is my understanding. Look, I have 10 years of counterterrorism experience on a regular basis. We are dealing with explosions, suicide bombers. The situation was out of control. This is my background. And when I think with a security background. And we cannot afford the masses of Arabians just invading, breaking the fence, and all of a sudden, what is that? 10 miles? What's
9 miles? Israel's waist at 9 miles at Tukar.
Okay. And up to this point, the Palestinian Authority has sponsored terrorism. They encouraged terrorism. Yasser Arafat was a terrorist. I was in his meeting when he gave my father the authority to blow up buses, markets, beaches during the second Palestinian Intifada. It was the piece of information that I gave to the Israeli Shin Bet that was provided to the United Nations to condemn Yasser Arafat as a terrorist. I was in that meeting. And we are talking about a con artist, Egyptian con artist, that is the father of the Palestinian cause. So now we are dealing with an ideology. Palestine is not a country. It should not get more legitimacy because it's only an ideology, and this ideology needs to be countered. As long as the false narrative is there, it will keep rolling like a snowball, and we will have to deal with the consequences. So now, I agree with them that our strategy should shift from defense to offense. We need to expose the false narrative. And when the world understands that there is no such thing as Palestine, that is just a false narrative. And the Palestinian entire narrative is the victim narrative that has nothing to do with reality, self-inflicted pain. This is what they've been doing. They brought themselves here, they brought the whole world here. It's not Israel's responsibility. Once we are able to mobilize Hollywood, journalism, everybody to bring the truth of this scam, political scam, then we may have a better chance to communicate with these people. But as long as they are living in this fantasy, we are not able to communicate with them. We are not able to please them or satisfy their ambition because it's a black hole. You give them East Jerusalem tomorrow, then they are going to say, we want West Jerusalem. If you give them the 1967, they are going to say, I want the whole thing. And they will continue to be a hostile. So now, we are in trouble. It's a big problem. It is a big problem. So, is there a solution? And Dan and I, we've been discussing this. Yes, there is a solution. But first of all, we have to get anchored in the truth and face reality, face things as they are. as long as we try to escape it, we are not able to provide a good solution for this problem.
I just want to... We would be remiss if we moved on to the last few minutes about solutions, and there are solutions. As a matter of fact, I remember very well back in 2006, the Jerusalem Center, at that time for Public Affairs, at the permission of my former boss, Dory Gold, we brought Jordanians and Palestinians to Washington to talk about a confederal federal approach to Palestinian, Israeli, Jordanian diplomacy. That is not to say, if His Majesty is watching from Amman, it is not to say that Jordan is Palestine for policy purposes, not to frighten anyone, but it is to say that there are federal, confederal approaches to living together, to diplomacy, to prosperity, security, and stability. But we would be remiss, ladies and gentlemen, if we did not go on the record and say what happened on October 7th was financed, supplied, strategized, and armed by the IRGC and the Iranian regime in Tehran. And we cannot allow this to go, as what they say, לעבור את זה סדר היום. Iran is the epicenter of what has happened before October 6th, after October 6th, the first direct attack on Israel by the Islamic Republic of Iran on October the 14th, and they're the taskmasters, the paymasters, the inspirers of Hamas, though they are Sunni, and also the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, though they are Sunni, the Houthis, the Hezbollah, etc. That is the address, and that is the epicenter of the strategic attack on Israel, which they remind us and have reminded us every day for the last 45 years as the little Satan that they will destroy us on the way to destroying who? The big Satan, the United States. So I wanted to go on record as having that in context just for a couple of minutes to talk about other possibilities, because many people in this room and in Israel, they say, in Hebrew, they say, ma ken, what is possible? There are many pathways to stability, security, because we have neighbors. We have Palestinian, Arab neighbors, Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, 1,500,000. We have 2 million Palestinian Gazans, and there are ways in order to create secure and amenable, even friendly ways of living together. Share some of your ideas, Mossab, before we have to leave the stage.
There are Arabs. I don't think that they're Palestinians. They're just carrying a false identity around. We are not Palestinians. When I was born, I had a Jordanian birth certificate, as millions of the people who were born there. So, first of all, we need to ask the people, what makes you a Palestinian? You are Arab. This is your ethnicity. And I don't think there is a problem between Arabs and Jews to get along. We have 2 million Arabs in Israel, even though I am not sure about their loyalty. And this is something also need to be taken into consideration. What we need a solid police force. We don't need 40 or 50,000 armed militia with Kalashnikovs all over the place protecting the governing authority. What do I want to do with all this? So first of all, we must disarm the Palestinian Authority. We don't need so many guns. We need a police force that is not corrupted, that can keep order for the Palestinians. Then it can assure Israel's security. Mahmoud Abbas will die sooner or later. The man is at the edge of collapse. And everybody is counting on Mahmoud Abbas. What's the day after Mahmoud Abbas? Who's going to rule the show? Who's going to be the player? They are conflicted people. So counting on the Palestinian Authority is a form of insanity. This is for the people who just like putting their head in the sand. They're not realizing. We are betting on a dying thing. Actually, it's already dead. So we need to find an alternative. And what we need a police force. And by the way, my wild opinion, let Arab rule Arab. How about mandatory recruitment to the Arabs, to the Israeli Arabs, to rule the Arabs in the West Bank. One solution. Okay, not so many enthusiasm for this, but Arabs know how to deal with Arabs. It's not Israel's fault to manage the Arab madness. If it's not that, it could be the Jordanian intelligence, it could be the Egyptian intelligence, it could be a confederation with Jordan, with Egypt. It could be whatever, but not the Palestinian Authority as is today. This arrangement I don't like, because they are deceptive, they are double-faced, they are untrustworthy, and they are hostile to Israel wherever they go. With that said, we need an alternative, and I think there is a possibility of a loyal, responsible force in the West Bank that will take care of the security, not only of the Arabs of Judea and Samaria, but also of the Jewish state security needs. This is on one hand. On the other hand, economy. The world has been investing so much money into the Palestinian Authority. And look at their operation. Worldwide embassies, delegations, ambassadors. How much is that budget, the annual budget, only to pay for the Palestinian Authority ambassadors and their entourage? Instead of all this, the Arabs in the West Bank don't need all this money spent, hundreds of millions of dollars on nonsense. We could have directed that money to build the economy for the generation in the West Bank. And this is where we need to shift strategy. Then, education. Education, I'd start with educating the Arabs of the West Bank on the Holocaust. This should be mandatory for every Arabian to learn from the Jewish experience, that never be a victim, to rise above pleasure, to rise above pain. This is the model that inspired me. But to stay a victim in victimhood, this is not acceptable. So Palestine is not going to solve the human condition in the West Bank. It is not going to solve the problem. Actually, it's creating more problems. With that said, we need to really have a deep look into the situation and be honest with ourselves. Is this serving the Arabs? Is this serving the Jews? Is this securing the future of the generation or not? Then after that, we make our decisions. Thank you, and I appreciate your patience.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Mossab, very much. It was great. Thank you.